Welcome to the deep dive.
Okay, so we've got this pretty fascinating stack of materials here, articles, notes, legends, and we're about to jump headfirst into a story that is, well, it's just so strange. It feels less like history, more like, I don't know, a riddle. It really pushes back on how we think about geography, reality itself, maybe even time.
That's absolutely right. We are tackling the very perplexing case of the man from Taured, and this isn't some, obscure thing anymore. It's kind of become a staple in paranormal discussions, online theories,
Yeah.
often presented like it's just accepted fact.
Yeah, exactly.
So our mission, really, in this deep dive, is to unpack the legend based on these sources you've got. We want to explore the so-called evidence, where it actually came from, examine the, frankly, wild theories it's generated, and try to figure out why this story, even with its, let's say, shaky foundations, still has such a strong hold on people's imagination. Right? We want to see what these sources really tell us about him, kind of strip back the layers, and figure out what stands out to you, the listener, as we go through it. So let's start at the beginning, the core story, as it's told in these pages anyway. Picture it. Tokyo International Airport, July 1954. Just a regular busy airport back then. Travelers, customs, the usual.
Right. And according to the legend, this seemingly ordinary European man walks up to the customs desk. The sources describe him as, well-dressed, looked cosmopolitan, apparently spoke several languages fluently, Japanese, French, German, Spanish. Nothing about him screamed unusual at first glance.
Until a passport. He hands it over, and okay, it looks official. These sources really stress that the print quality, photo, stamps, it all seems legit, but the country, Taured, and that's the moment it all goes off the rails.
Yeah.
The customs guys, obviously, they check their maps, their lists of countries. Nope, no Taured. Doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm. And this is where his reaction is really key to the story. At first, he's just like bewildered, confused. Maybe he thinks they're mistaken. But when the officials keep insisting, look, Taured isn't real, his reaction supposedly ramps up. Frustration, then just outright anger. He's adamant. Taured is real. It's a nation. It's been around for 1,000 years.
Wow. And the story says they even show him a map, and he points right there between France and Spain, exactly where Andorra is on our maps. He says that's where Taured should be.
Yeah. And it wasn't just the passport either. The sources say he had a whole set of other documents, all described as looking really authentic. An international driver's license from Taured, a checkbook from a Taured bank. He even had a valid European money on him. The detail about the documents looking so professional, with official-looking seals and everything, it's crucial. It makes this impossible claim feel strangely grounded. Official, somehow.
So, okay, they try to check something, anything. They call the Japanese company he said he was visiting for business. And get this. The company says, yeah, we know someone with that name, but he's from a totally different European country. Not Taured.
Right, and the hotel he claimed he had a reservation at?
Yeah.
Nothing. No booking. His bank, nobody's ever heard of it internationally.
So it's like every piece of his story checks out individually, except for the absolute foundation of this country. He exists, but his whole context just doesn't fit our reality.
Exactly. So the authorities are baffled. I mean, what do you even do with a guy from nowhere carrying perfect papers from that nowhere?
Well, according to the legend, they couldn't just say, okay, off you go. So they detained him. He's put in a hotel room, under guard, on an upper floor. And the story is specific. No balcony, no way out except the guarded door. Escape seems impossible. And here's another really key point. They confiscated his passport and all those other documents, held him separately, locked up.
Which just sets up the most baffling part of the whole thing, the real kicker. The next morning, the guards go to the room, and it's empty. The man, gone. Just gone. And maybe even weirder, according to these sources, all his confiscated documents, the passport, the license, the checks, they'd also vanish from wherever the authorities were keeping them safe.
Wow.
Yeah. They searched, apparently frantically, but nothing. He was never seen again. He just ceased to be there.
And that's the core legend. Man from nowhere, impossible papers, vanishes from a locked room. Papers disappear too. It sounds like, yeah, sci-fi. But this is where our deep dive gets really interesting, because these sources you brought, they start to peel back the curtain on where this story actually comes from.
And this is so important because these sources point out a huge, almost glaring issue. There is absolutely zero official corroboration. We're talking nothing. No Japanese government records, no airport logs from '54 mentioning this, no police files, not one newspaper report from the time. For an incident this dramatic international traveler, detention, vanishing act, the official silence is, well, it's deafening.
Right. And for people who believe the story, that silence becomes the proof, doesn't it? It's twisted. The lack of records means, aha, cover-up.
Exactly, they must have suppressed it. But the actual origin, based on this research, it's much more recent than 1954, and maybe a lot less mysterious. The first time we actually see this story in print seems to be in a 1960 French book, Le Matin des Magiciens.
The Morning of the Magicians. I've heard of that one. Jacques Bergier and Louis Paul. So tell us about them. What was their deal?
Well, they were kind of pioneers of this genre they called fantasy créole. You can translate it as the real, fantastic, or mysterious reality. Their whole thing was blending science, myths, esotericism, fringe theories. It wasn't about strict historical fact-checking. They wanted to provoke, to challenge how people saw the world, hint at mysteries hiding just beneath the surface. They often presented cool stories or claims without really citing hard sources.
Okay, so not exactly investigative journalists meticulously verifying every detail. More like collectors of strange and wonderful, maybe unsubstantiated tales.
Precisely. And in Morning of the Magicians, they included the Taured incident. They presented it like it was a true thing they'd heard about, but offered absolutely no verifiable sources. Zip. It was just one anecdote among many other unverified mysteries and speculations in this big, sprawling book.
And from that one mention, the story started to spread.
Yep. Other writers, especially in the, paranormal and mystery fields, picked it up in the 70s and 80s. And often, with each retelling, details got added or maybe exaggerated. The specific languages he spoke, the documents vanishing too, the room being totally inaccessible, making it sound more solid, more unexplainable. Sometimes these later versions would mention unnamed sources or hint at secret files to give it a credibility the original mention never had.
And then came the internet.
Oh yeah, that was like pouring gasoline on the fire. The Taured story just exploded online. Forums, blogs, websites, almost always presented as, this really happened, governments covered it up. And because, well, there are no official records to easily debunk it, you can't disprove something that wasn't documented in the first place. That very lack of official debunking was seen as more proof of the cover-up. It just thrived as this really compelling urban legend.
Huh. So if you stand back and look at it through that lens, the conspiracy isn't really about hiding a proven event. It's more like a story, a myth that started in a speculative book, got amplified, and took on a life of its own online. That really changes the perspective, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It shifts it from, maybe a genuine paranormal mystery to a fascinating case study in how legends are born and spread in our modern age, especially ones that tap into that distrust of authority and love of the unexplained.
Okay, but let's, for a moment, accept the story as it's told, regardless of where it came from. It's so bizarre, it naturally begs for some wild explanations. Which brings us to the theories.
Oh yeah. If you take the legend at face value, man from nowhere vanishes from locked room, you absolutely need something extraordinary to explain it. And the biggest one, the theory you see pop up most often, is parallel dimensions, the multiverse.
Right. Explain that idea for us.
The core concept is that this guy somehow slipped, maybe accidentally, from a parallel Earth into ours. And on his Earth, Taured is a real country, right there between France and Spain, just like he said. This theory often talks about, maybe subtle differences between these realities. Perhaps Taured exists there instead of Andorra, or maybe they share geography but have different histories, different names, that kind of thing.
And how does that explain him vanishing?
Well, a couple of ways. Maybe he found a way back, some ability or tech we don't understand, or maybe something or someone here prevented him from staying, or even actively sent him back. Or somewhere else. It's wide open, really.
And these sources mention a couple of other ideas too, right?
Yeah.
Maybe less common.
Yeah, briefly. Time travel gets mentioned, but it doesn't fit quite as well. I mean, why would a time traveler be confused by a 1954 map? You'd think they'd know the geography. Or just broader interdimensional travel. Maybe not a parallel Earth, but a whole different kind of reality. That gets pretty abstract, though.
But the one that seems to resonate most, maybe because it feels more human, even if sinister, is the government cover-up angle. This is where the conspiracy thinking really digs in.
Absolutely. This is the heart of the conspiracy view, that he didn't just poof away on his own, that powerful hidden forces were involved.
And one version is just that he could return on his own, and vanishing was just him, checking out.
And that's one idea. But the more common theory you see referenced in these sources is covert capture and study. The idea is the moment he was detained, maybe Japanese authorities or perhaps some secret international group working with them, like a shadowy CIA division or a paranormal unit, grabbed him.
And why would they do that? What's the supposed motivation?
Oh, huge motivations. Think about it. They could study him as biology, maybe it's different, get knowledge about his world, figure out how he crossed over, maybe try to reverse engineer his technology, even if it's just that impossible passport. How was it made? Plus, keep the public from panicking. And maybe even exploit his knowledge for military or economic advantage. His vanishing then isn't him leaving, it's them making him disappear permanently.
These sources also toss in a couple of related concepts, like the anomalous human, like he's a glitch in the matrix, basically. Or the nexus point idea that maybe certain places, like big airports, are just thinner spots between dimensions.
Exactly. The story fits neatly into those pre-existing frameworks of paranormal thought and fringe science. It just clicks for people who think along those lines.
Okay, so let's circle back to the evidence, because as our sources point out, the proof for this incredible story isn't exactly concrete. It's kind of circular. It relies mostly on the story's own details and, weirdly, the lack of outside proof.
It's quite the paradox, isn't it? The absence of evidence becomes the evidence for believers. Let's break down what gets cited in these retellings. First, the lack of official records, always presented as Exhibit A for the cover-up.
Then you have the descriptions of the documents, how authentic they supposedly looked, the Taured passport, the license. The fact they seem so real, despite being impossible, adds this layer of, well, something weird was going on.
Right.
And them vanishing, too. That's like double proof for believers. Either he took his reality with him, or the secret agency scrubbed everything clean.
Right. And the implausible disappearance itself. Vanishing from a guarded room with no exit. For many, that alone demands an extraordinary explanation, which then makes the parallel universe or cover-up theories seem more plausible. It's the core miracle of the story.
It's also interesting how, just by being told over and over, the story creates this feeling of unverifiable eyewitnesses. The legend mentions customs officials, police, but never names them. But the sheer repetition makes it feel like someone somewhere must have seen it. The story becomes its own proof through retelling.
And a subtle point that helps is the geographic hole, pointing specifically to the Andorra region. It makes the alternate reality seem just plausible enough it's a real place, not with his country's name. It anchors the impossible to a specific spot on the map.
And that weird detail about the company connection. The Japanese company knew the name, but from a different country. That fuels the subtle differences between realities idea. Maybe in his world, that company did deal with someone from Taured. It's confusing, but adds another layer for believers to point to.
It's really striking how all these internal story elements combined with the lack of external proof construct the entire case for belief, especially for those already open to these kinds of ideas.
Okay, so let's bring in the other side, the skeptical perspective, which these sources cover pretty well too. From this angle, the man from Taured isn't a mystery traveler or a government secret. He's a classic urban legend.
Yeah, for skeptics, the absolute killer is the primary source problem. The total, complete lack of any official record for something this dramatic in 1954 Tokyo. It just strains credulity past the breaking point. If a foreign national was detained at the airport under such weird circumstances and then vanish, there would be some kind of paper trail. Even if it was confused or classified later, the silence is just too absolute.
And knowing the story is likely, Origin Bergier and Paul's Fantastique Réel book is crucial for skeptics. Realizing it probably came from speculative literature, not a documented incident report, completely changes how you view it. It wasn't dug out of secret files, it was published in a book known for unverified anecdotes.
And like any story passed around, especially before the internet could instantly fact-check, it probably suffered from the telephone game effect. Details likely got added, sharpened, maybe exaggerated over the years to make it juicier, more mysterious. That whole vanishing act, maybe that was a later addition to really ramp up the weirdness. It's entirely possible a much simpler incident, a confused traveler, a language barrier problem, maybe even a hoax someone started, was the original spark that got blown way out of proportion over decades.
Which ties right into the psychological appeal. Why do we like this story so much? It taps into something deep in us, right?
Yeah.
Fascination with the unknown, the extraordinary.
Definitely. And that element of distrust of authority plays a big role too. If you can't find proof, it's almost easier for some people to assume they're hiding it than to consider that maybe. There's nothing to find because the story isn't literally true, or it's been heavily distorted.
So when you weigh it all up, based on these sources, Occam's razor seems to gut pretty clearly here, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The simplest explanation is probably a fictional story or a hugely embellished anecdote that started in a specific kind of book and then just grew into this modern myth that requires way fewer leaps of faith than parallel worlds or secret government snatch squads.
But despite all that, despite the lack of hard evidence and the likely origins in fiction, the man from Taured's story has definitely cemented itself as a kind of modern myth, an archetype.
Yeah, it's become one of the go-to examples in discussions about parallel universes or interdimensional travel. People cite it like it's proof, even without evidence beyond the tale itself.
And you see echoes of it in pop culture, right? Science fiction, TV shows, the idea of someone showing up from a place that doesn't exist. It resonates.
And for people already leaning toward believing in hidden realities or government conspiracies, it serves as powerful confirmation bias. It's often presented online as if it's verified history, even though, as these sources show, its factual basis is incredibly weak.
And that unverifiable nature is key to its power. Because there's no specific 1954 incident report to point to and definitively debunk, it stays in that murky what-if zone. It allows belief and speculation to just keep going. That lack of proof gets flipped into proof of suppression. It's a fascinating dynamic.
So wrapping up this deep dive, we've journeyed through this really strange account of the man from Taured. We looked at the legend itself, dug into its surprising origins, explored the pretty wild theories it fuels, examined what passes for evidence, and considered the more grounded, skeptical view.
And the story, true or not, really forces you, the listener, to grapple with some big questions. What is the nature of reality? How much do we really know? How do stories like this take root and spread? And what does our fascination with the extraordinary say about us?
It leaves us with this final thought, something for you to chew on. Does reality maybe have, thin spots? Are there things happening just off the grid of documented history that really do defy simple explanations? Or is the man from Taured ultimately just a really compelling story, a testament to our imagination and our deep-seated desire to believe in something more, a modern myth for the internet age?
It lasts because it asks those questions, doesn't it? Questions we might not ever get definitive answers to.
We've laid out what our sources tell us: the legend, the likely origin, the theories, the skepticism. The question we leave with you is, what do you believe?